Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. One of my favorite things to do is actually to cook food because food is delicious if it's good food. And I enjoy making food for my family, whether it's a batch of nice sauerkraut or some fried potatoes, butter, not oil, what have you. I don't know, I like stir fry, I like curry. There's all kinds of different things. One of my favorite pieces of cooking equipment, I don't really have a whole kit, but is this nice cast iron frying pan. It was my Christmas present 2 Christmases ago. Still got a little bit of breakfast in there. But the reason that's relevant is because I've been thinking for a while about a perfect companion blade for that pan and other stuff that you're gonna do with it. What is the ultimate, or at least a really great outdoor cooking knife that I'm also gonna use in the kitchen? Well, I've got some inspiration. This knife right here is a blade that I forged out of a ball bearing quite a while ago. It's something I use in the kitchen quite frequently, and I really like the blade design, or the blade shape. I use it for a petty or paring knife for lots of different things, and it gave me some ideas as to what this larger knife could look like. And I even have a drawing of what I think it might look like, and I'm gonna explain this a little bit. The way I sketch knives is to draw lots of lines, and somewhere in there is the actual blade. So let's get started. Well, thanks for being here, guys. We're going to start this project off with none other than our 52-100 high carbon steel. And this is a 3/4 round bar. I have a lot of this stock. It was pretty economical to purchase it in this form. And I have other 52-100 stock as well, but since I have the equipment to forge this out, I figured it was a pretty good trade-off. You do spend some more time, and so, you know, time is money. I don't know, it's about the same, I suppose. Gonna go ahead and cut this off. Saves a trip over to the abrasive cutoff saw. Saves on abrasives. Again, another little trade-off. Takes a few more minutes here. A hot cut would be nice too. I need to forge one of those one of these days, I suppose. So I'm gonna forge this down to about 1 1/8 by 3/8, somewhere in that neighborhood. And we need to cut it in half because I'm going to make 2 knives here, and I've got a nice angled cut there so that we can use that to forge the tips or the ends of our blades on the knife here. So thinking about a cooking knife, you know, that is one of the things that I enjoy about making chef's knives or kitchen knives. They're a particular knife that might see more use than some of the knives that get made in a custom shop. And you know, you really think about the different characteristics that make a good kitchen knife. And this is true of any knife. The thinner it is, potentially, and most of the time, the better it's going to cut. Now obviously there's a point of diminishing return where you have to have a certain level of blade strength and that kind of thing. But the kitchen knife is one area in which you can really push the limit on that, and then, you know, bring it back just a little bit so you have a nice margin of comfort there. But what I'm trying to say is, in general, your kitchen blades should be the thinnest blades that you will ever make. And the purpose behind that is simple. It's so that they cut well and they slice through those veggies and that meat with ease, and just makes it a joy to use these blades. So that's an important factor behind a good kitchen or chef's knife, in my opinion. And I think that's pretty widely accepted. We're going to forge the tang here. I'm starting with 2 inches of stock, and with the thickness of stock we have here, I should be able to draw that out to a full-length handle. Next, we'll work on the point or the tip of the knife here, and as I sort of had in the drawing, I want to have a pretty obtuse sort of straight angle at the end of the blade there. Spread that stock out there, get the width that we want. This is sort of an extra forging step that I have to do on this round stock. So again, like I said, you know, the trade-off is that I'm using more time and more, you know, electricity, etc., more fuel in the forge to actually make this stock do what I want it to. But I think it's a reasonable trade-off. And then I have other stock that I don't have to do this with, and it costs me more money than the round bar did. So, you know, it is what it is, and that's just some of those little things that you think about, or maybe want to think about, when you're purchasing stock or looking at different projects. But having the power hammer definitely is nice, and we'll get this forged out flat and the width a little bit. And I do want to forge the bevels in a little bit here, and part of the purpose behind what I'm doing right here, not just forging the bevels in, but also making sure that I have that nice sweeping edge on this blade. That's something I really want here. Just makes, you know, cutting meat especially, and then also all your veggies and stuff, just drawing it through that foodstuffs, it just adds that a little bit of extra cutting ability there that is nice to use. So working on the tang here, and I'm forging this out widthwise. The stock is pretty thin here. I will say that in general forging practice, if you can avoid having to try to forge the width when the stock is this thin, it's better, it's easier. And I probably could have done it a little bit differently here, but the main thing is to maintain the thickness that I want, and then also get the length of the tang and the blade. Final touch up and straightening, and we are done forging these blades. Alright, so we've got a couple of blades forged up here, and I'm not claiming that I'm making the perfect outdoor cooking knife, quote unquote, but there are some characteristics that I specifically wanted here, and I'll just kind of run you through them real quick here. Probably the biggest idea that I had out of this for this whole project has to do with this angle right here. Let me show you why. If you're just going to use one tool to cook with, obviously a knife is going to be very close to the top of the list, if not at the very top of the list. But the very next thing that you need when you're cooking with any kind of pan, particularly cast iron, is a nice spatula or scraper. Hence the angle here. Now I was unable to, well, I didn't really make sure that I forged them exactly where I want the angle. They look a little bit more like a regular knife, but I need to make this a little bit more obtuse, because the whole point here is that you can use this angle here as a nice scraper, food stirrer kind of a thing. And that is something that I think is going to be super useful and kind of cool on this knife. So we'll just get that profile cleaned up a little bit on the grinder here, take off the little bumps and wobbles on the edge there, and we can start the heat treating regimen here for these blades. I will say that forging closer to finished dimensions is kind of growing on me a little bit, kind of negates any need for rough grinding, which is something I typically have done in the past, and also depending on the project, such as maybe a Damascus blade where you want to leave the steel on until the last minute kind of a thing. But in this case, I got the spines forged down to about 100 thousandths, and that's a pretty good thickness, and they're going to stay that thickness, and the bevels, a little thinner, about 60 thousandths, I think. So it's kind of nice. You just do your heat treat, and they're obviously plenty thin to get a nice quench on, and you do all your grinding post heat treat. And it's not a lot of grinding because you've already forged down fairly close to your finished dimension. So I don't know, it's something to think about. Depending on the project, it could be pretty handy, and I'm finding it useful in certain cases. So we'll get these blades into the quench here after multiple previous heat treat processes. And this is, so I've mentioned this many times in the past, but it's actually a form of mar quenching. And what that is where you quench down to a particular temperature that is necessary to harden the blade, and then you slow the cooling drastically from that point. And the way I'm doing that here is by removing it from the quench after we've gotten past the critical point in the cooling rate for the steel. And what happens then is you really slowly allow the steel to drop in temperature and transform into martensite. But you also start getting a little bit of bainite because of the slow transformation rate, which makes the blade tougher. And it's just neat. It's a great way to do it. Now these blades are turning out great, and as it cools, there's usually some minor straightening to do, and that was the case here, but nothing bad and nothing warped. So pretty happy with that. And of course, once the blades have cooled down completely and completed that martensitic transformation, they are more than hard enough to skate a file once you get past a very thin layer of decarb, as you would expect. At this point, our heat treat processes or regimen is almost complete, and we just have to temper the knife to make it a little bit tougher and remove just a little bit of that hardness and make this blade usable and long-lasting. It's kind of interesting how cooking and metallurgy have a lot in common. Really, heat, or I should say even more simplistically, energy and time are the two components that you use to heat treat steel and to make it into the state that you need it to be to make a good blade. And it's similar with food, heat and time, or energy and time. Well, not to mention also seasoning, I suppose, so you got to add that in there, but that I'm not sure what that would be on the blade. But anyway, we'll get this blade ground now, and I start by grinding close to my finished bevel right at the edge there, knock off that corner on the cross section, and then work my way up towards the spine with the rest of the bevel. Once we've completed grinding it up to a higher grit, I'm going to use the buffing wheel to shine this up, as well as the forge flats. Now this wheel is rotating away from me, and that is why I'm holding the blade like this. You have to be very, very careful to keep all edges off of the wheel. This is probably, well, this is the most dangerous piece of equipment in the shop, and I don't use it a whole lot, but it can be nice for some things. You have to be super careful with it. I'm going to use natural canvas micarta for this project here. And one note about micarta, some people have an idea that it can be slick or not have a good grip to it, and I suppose that's true depending on how it's finished. The way I've decided, or I've come to the conclusion of the best way to finish my micarta handles for most applications is to finish it out with a 220 grit sandpaper. And that, you know, if you're careful, it leaves a aesthetically pleasing finish to it. It's not polished though, and so it actually provides quite a good grip, including when it's wet. And so instead of finishing that out to a high polish or buffing that out, that just really kind of provides the best of both worlds. It looks good, and it also provides a nice grip to use. This seems like a good option for a cooking knife, durable, waterproof, and ready to go. Alright guys, this has been a fun project, and we have two very similar outdoor cooking blades, and I'm going to show you some pictures of the knives in just a second here. But what am I going to do with these knives? Well, one is going to be available, and the next one I'm going to test, I'm going to try out, I'm going to use cooking some delicious food outdoors. So stay tuned, because that's going to be the very next video here, and that should be a good time. Don't forget that you can hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, enable those notifications. All that helps the channel out, and I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next video.